This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Samsung Notebook 9. Well, Samsung always likes to have a 9 in the name. They're dropping the ATIV, though. The box still has ATIV on it. It is the Notebook 9. This is incredible. This is, no, I haven't gone to the gym. I'm not strong now. This is 1.9 pounds. It actually weighs a little bit less than that. And Samsung specialized in thin and light laptops several years ago. They kind of wowed the market, and they outdid the MacBook Air for a stunning looking all metal design and being about 30% lighter than the competition. Finally, they've done it again. So now, instead of your 3-pound Ultrabook, everybody's happy to make it a 13.3-inch size. Again, 1.9 pounds, about a ½ an inch thick, crazy thin, very beautiful metal casing, full Intel Core i5, no Core M's here, nothing underpowered, 8 gigs of RAM, a 256 gig SSD, a lovely 1080p display, $999, which makes it very price competitive with other Ultrabooks that are similar in terms of having a Core i5, around that much memory and storage space, give or take. Some still have 128 gigs for that price. Metal casing, all that sort of thing. So Samsung, it used to be a premium they charge for the product, and not really anymore. So too long didn't watch? Go buy one. If you want to find out why, we're going to find out now. Undeniably, this is an attractive looking machine, isn't it? I still kind of prefer that inky blue-black that Samsung has used on ATIV books in the past, but the Notebook 9 is still really good looking, and one of the benefits is this does not show fingerprints, like not at all. Also, black keyboard with white letters, yay! Unlike HP with the Spectre series, they're not going for, well, the uniform kind of look there. They realize you actually have to be able to see the keys. The backlighting is a really cool kind of blue-green, too, which looks nice and is more restful on the eyes. The distinctive Samsung design is still here, that kind of teardrop on the side with the very flat edges. You're not going to get that fancy chromed look on the edges, but that's okay. It's still one of the most attractive machines I've seen. Trackpad, very large. Microsoft Precision Trackpad works very well, very predictable, good stuff there. And for once, Samsung is actually not several $100s more than the competition. Here we have it right next to the Dell XPS 13, another relatively petite machine that actually with the same configuration costs $100 more. Good times, Samsung, good times. And for those of you who aren't thinking of just traditional laptops, there is the Samsung Galaxy Tab Pro S we just reviewed, shown here. 12-inch tablet/convertible laptop, $899. Ergonomics are not exactly laptop-like ideally, but they're not bad. But you do get things like a touchscreen and a higher resolution screen. So Samsung's trying to cover all the bases here, obviously. But we'll go back to focusing on things that are traditional notebooks now, which is what the Notebook 9 is. Okay, so something's got to give, right? The price is right at $999. The weight is insane. It's very slim. It has a full Intel Core i5, 2.3 gigahertz inside. Competitive RAM, competitive SSD. Battery life, right? Battery life must stink. Well, no, not really so much. We'll get into that in depth a little bit later. The display. The only drawback to the display is it's not a touchscreen. Other than that, it's excellent. We'll also take a look at that in depth. In terms of ports, you're not really suffering either, although some things are micro-sized, and Samsung has done that before. So has ASUS with some of the ZenBooks early on. And we'll take a look at the side right here, and we have two USB 3.0 ports. There's no USB-C on this one. We have micro HDMI instead of full-size HDMI, because obviously there's no room for full-size HDMI, but you still do get your HDMI there. Headphone jack combo, the usual right there. And on this side, there's that other USB port, and we have a adapter for Ethernet, so you don't have to use up a USB port, and it allows for faster transfer speeds for gigabit Ethernet, and that is included in the box. There's also a port, now Samsung's been doing that for a while with their laptops, for VGAs, like micro VGA. That adapter is not in the box. Most people probably don't need it, but in case you do, it's there. In terms of torsion, this is still a metal laptop. All the panels are going to be thinner and lighter than normal, but it's very rigid. The keyboard deck on this does not flex whatsoever. Whether you're typing or whether you're trying to intentionally abuse the thing, it doesn't. The only time I could induce any flex is when I was taking off the bottom cover. It does have a removable bottom cover, Phillips head screws here, but these guys are very tight, very stiff. So I had to use a lot of downward force. I mean, a surprising amount, because I didn't want to strip the heads of the screws. And then I could see the side flexing just a little bit. But that's an inordinate amount of force to apply, and that it's fairly reasonable. So you can remove the bottom cover here. Oh, and by the way, here's our full-size SD card slot. Surprisingly, it's not micro underneath this little door right here. You can remove the screws and then you can take the bottom off. It's pretty easy to do. The stereo speakers are obviously over here. And there are some upgradable internals. Like most Ultrabooks, RAM is soldered on. It's 8 gigs of RAM. That's all you got. That's all you're ever going to get unless they decide to make a model that has more RAM soldered on board, which I haven't heard of happening. The SSD is in an M2 slot. They're using a SATA 3 interface SSD. Interestingly, even though Samsung seems to make the lion's share of SSDs on the market, they're using Lite-On brand, which is a division of Plextor. It benchmarks decently, so I'm not going to complain about that. It's just interesting that Samsung, with their own laptops, seems to not use their own drives. The wireless card is the Intel 8260. Dual band 802.11 AC with Bluetooth 4.1, and that is actually integrated into the motherboard. We'll show you a photo of the guts in a minute so you can see it for yourself, so you can't swap that out. That is the latest generation Intel card. It is a good card. Though we noticed that connection speeds weren't always as high as some of our other laptops, though actual data transfer speeds were equally as good. Interesting there. That would probably have to do more with the metal casing and the way the antenna runs around the frame or something like that, and not the wireless card. It is a 2x2 wireless card, and again, the range didn't seem to be quite as good as some other products. Not terrible, but the throughput was very good on it. The battery is inside. It is a 30 watt-hour battery, which sounds like not very high capacity, but we'll get into that. This is the charger. It's compact. It has plenty of cord, traditional style charger, which I actually prefer because those are particularly robust and because you do get a lot of cord. Now, another thing to talk about is if you want a 15-inch and not 13.3-inch. Samsung likes to make 15-inch counterparts, really 15.6. This is also available in a 15-inch size, and that one is $11.99. It has a Core i7. Otherwise, the specs are the same: 1080p, non-touch display, the whole 9 yards. It does add a USB-C port. So with super skinny laptops, another thing that usually suffers is the keyboard. And this is actually a lovely keyboard to type on. We have pretty decent key travel despite the skinny size here. That's not exactly paltry. We have nice key damping, good force actuation. I love typing on this keyboard. Actually, I typed out an entire long written review that corresponds to this video review on it. Good stuff. The trackpad is obviously quite large there. It's a Microsoft Precision trackpad, which means that it's very, well, precise. It behaves well. It's predictable. You don't get all the fancy gesture settings that you might get on some other trackpads, but I'll take the much better behavior of the Microsoft Precision trackpad, which is about as Mac-like as you're going to get on a Windows laptop. That keyboard, by the way, is backlit in a very neat blue-green color. We're going to show you what it looks like in the dark in a minute. Very restful on the eyes, multi-stage, all that good stuff. And this is what the keyboard looks like in an almost dark room. See, it's a kind of blue-green backlighting. Reminds me of EL backlighting, though it's probably just colored LEDs underneath. But yeah, it's really much more restful on the eyes, yet effective. You can set different stages of backlighting, and you can also control the duration. So it's not one of those notebooks that's going to drive you crazy where the backlighting on the keys goes off after like 3 seconds or 5 seconds. You can control that. So just like the Dell XPS 13 base model, this is a 1920 by 1080 non-touch panel. It's a glossy panel, but I have to say Samsung controls the glare incredibly well. For the most part, it actually doesn't even seem like a glossy panel. You get the benefit of the seemingly richer colors and better contrast that glossiness imparts, but at the same time, I couldn't see my reflection and notice my glasses were crooked or anything like that. So they've done a good job here. This is a bright display. Samsung claims 400 nits. We measured it closer to 350 nits, which is still brighter than the category average and quite adequate for outdoor use. It's a Samsung PLS panel, which is IPS-like. It has the same wide viewing angles, and some PLS panels have had not so fantastic contrast. This one has good contrast. The black levels are quite good at 0.39 at max brightness. And that combined with the high brightness levels means a contrast ratio of 900:1. So this actually does better than the more expensive Samsung T-Book 9 Spin in terms of contrast. Colors are lovely on this too. It reminds me a lot of the Microsoft Surface Pro 4 display, which is also a Samsung PLS panel. We've got full sRGB coverage here, 76% of Adobe RGB. Color accuracy is very good. The gamma scale on this, 2.2, is absolutely perfect along the whole line of the graph. And now Samsung has different settings you can choose for your display color preferences, not unlike their phones. And right there we have the shortcut to Samsung settings, and if we take a look at display, using the usual picture they do on Galaxy phones and also on the Galaxy Tab S Pro. We got auto, which automatically adjusts contrast and colors depending on what you're looking at. Dynamic, which is kind of HDR-like. Standard, which is pretty close to sRGB if you want to be compatible for anything on the web. Photo editing is nice and a little bit warmer. This is the one I would choose. This is actually a good one for editing photos, and it tones down the slight coolness of the 7300 degree Kelvin native display. And then we have one for reading, which softens things up a little bit more. While we're looking at the settings over here, we got quick settings, and you can choose which of the settings appear in quick settings here. Auto booting means you open the lid, it automatically turns on. You can USB charge when the machine is sleeping. I put the display color here. You've got a variety of music effects. You can set the keyboard brightness. You can also do that with an F key on the keyboard. For audio, there's a couple of different audio profiles here. Music is the jack of all trades that I pick. Privacy protection, input devices, and you can, again, press and go over here is a little bit weird. If you press and hold on the trackpad, it'll come up with forward and back buttons. Convenience, you can turn on silent mode. Also, you get the idea. So there's a variety of settings here. Other than that, it really isn't loaded with any kind of bloatware. So Samsung really delivers a pretty clean machine. Now, in terms of benchmarks, it benchmarks like most other Core i5 laptops on the market of the Intel Skylake generation, this latest 6th generation here. In fact, it does a little bit better on PCMark 8, which does a combination of things, including graphics performance, Intel HD 520 graphics here, sorry, no dedicated graphics in something this skinny, and SSD speed. So that's a good number there for the home accelerated test. The SSD score right here, and this is a SATA 3 interface, not PCIe, which for the price is okay. I'm okay with that. That's pretty cool. Speeds are actually decent for the light-on SSD. Geekbench 3, again, thoroughly predictable and respectable numbers here for a Core i5. And for 3D Mark, though, this is obviously not a gaming laptop. It scores 1546 on the performance mode test, which is pretty much, again, like everything else it competes with in dual-core Ultrabook 15-watt CPU land with integrated graphics. You can do, light, casual gaming on this thing. This is not meant for playing Battlefield 4 day in, day out. This is obviously not a gaming laptop. This is an ultra-thin, ultra-portable, but you can get away with a little BioShock Infinite, the usual Ultrabooky kind of things. It has certainly enough power to do any everyday productivity task. Word, Excel, some database development, light coding, Photoshop, 1080p video editing occasionally. And the delightful thing is, despite the fact it's thin and has a metal casing, it doesn't get burning hot. The hot spot is not on the top at all. It's on the underside, right in the center where it would be between your legs. And it's not burning hot, but that's the place where you'll feel it warm up. The fans also are almost never on. The thing is just uncannily quiet. Even when benchmarking, you'll hear them come on, but the fan is not really loud. It's not going to bother anybody, that's for sure. So, battery life. It has to be bad, right? I mean, something this thin, this light, the battery, No, it doesn't. It actually doesn't stink. It's not flat on its back because it's out of juice by any means. Obviously, it can lay flat on its back, and that's part of the reason it has the robust hinges to support that mode of use. For those of you who are wondering why that exists, I sometimes wonder myself. Business people use it for giving presentations. If you want to torture somebody with PowerPoint, they can sit across from you. Anyway, 30-watt-hour battery. That's a bit smaller than we usually see, but then again, like other non-touch 1080p resolution laptops like the base XPS 13, these days 1080p and no touch means using a lot less power, so that's why Samsung did that here. Perfectly acceptable resolution, everything looks fine, sharp on the screen, all that sort of thing, but it saves battery power. And though Samsung claims 10 hours for the 13.3-inch model, of course, that's going to be optimistic. You'd have to run it at a very low brightness, all that sort of thing. Keeping it at 40% brightness, which is pretty darn bright because it's a bright display with Wi-Fi on and active, and our usual productivity test, which includes writing the written review, streaming House of Cards on Netflix, social networking, web surfing, a little YouTubing, some photo editing, all that sort of thing. It averaged me 7.5 hours. That's miraculous, honestly, for something this skinny. That's quite good. And that's not trying hard to manage power and to make it last longer. For the 15-inch model, that has a 39 watt-hour battery that Samsung claims is good for up to 12 hours. Given that it has just about the same specs, just a slightly higher panel to drive, but it has a bigger battery, it's probably, you know, going to outlast this one by an hour in real-life use. The one place where thin and light does take its toll are the speakers. We have it set to 70% volume right now. It's pretty thin, it's pretty tinny. The volume isn't great, but you really don't want to drive it much higher because it's only going to start to sound even more thin and tinny. So definitely a good candidate for headphones. So let's listen.
The Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge. Edge because it has curved sides. Both sides are curved.
Yeah, you know, not so great there, is it? So that's the Samsung Notebook 9. This is what I like to see. This is exciting. This is a step forward. We all want thin and light machines, but we don't want to give up on processing power. We want a reasonable display. 13.3 inches has been the sweet spot for Ultrabooks, very portable laptops for a while now. We get all of that here without really giving up much. I mean, you can even open it up and do some upgrades inside. That's not bad at all. And the price, you're not paying a 50% price increase either for this, which is a new thing for Samsung, not charging that premium. Anyway, if you're looking for a thin and light travel buddy, that's as powerful as any Core i5 Ultrabook out there on the market, capable of doing work for school, for workplace, for most everybody, unless you do super duper heavy lifting kind of computing. This would be it. It's crazy. It's just crazy in a good way. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos.